So they have their soil mixed up, they ready to plant, they plant. What size containers do you generally recommend? Like I think you mentioned 7-gallon containers. Are you in larger containers? And then when does that first feeding actually happen?
So I would recommend maybe starting in a 7 and moving to a 15 if you're going to want to do like a midway transfer, a mid transplant, or just going straight to the 15 if you don't want to deal with that and add the extra stressor. It's kind of crucial to have that surface area in an organic setting so that I call them batteries. They're soil batteries. If you got a 15-gallon soil battery, it's going to have enough juice to supply that plant for all the way through the vegetative state and maybe a few weeks into flower. At that point, you're going to want to top dress. You're going to want to start using some compost teas. I like to use them once a week during like the first 3 to 4 weeks of flower because there's a huge uptake of nutrients and they're shooting up, sometimes double their size to 3 times their size in the flower room after the flip. And that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of nutrients. And it's safe to say that a good 60 to 70% of the stuff that you thought was there has been eaten up by that point in time. If you are doing 7-gallon pots and you just don't have the room to do 15 or 10-gallon pots, it just means you got to do a couple more top dressings. I would top dress halfway through vegetative stage. If your veg period's usually 6 weeks, let's say, or 4 weeks, do a top dress at 2 weeks in, and then top dress right before it goes into flower. And you should be pretty solid.
Okay, so if you're trying to make it as easy as possible, 15-gallon containers, literally plant in there. You don't have to do your first feeding or top dressing until the flowering stage is what you mentioned, several weeks into the flowering stage, which is awesome. I've just been using these 7-gallon containers right now, and I've been doing exactly kind of what you just mentioned. Is there are feedings within the vegetation stage. I'm doing a top dressing within the vegetation stage. It's usually, what I'll do is I'll do about 30 days, then 20 to 30 days, then I'll do a top dressing. And then shortly after that, I'm usually flipping to flower. And then from there, I will do another top dressing, roughly 20, 30 days into flower. And that usually gets me through the grow. And that's in 7-gallon containers. But, you make me want to actually switch to a larger container because then I'll have to do less feedings, right?
It's worth it in the long run. And it usually ends up equaling out. I'm always worried, maybe if I do that, I'm not going to be able to run as many plants and my harvest isn't going to be what it needs to be. But typically when you're running bigger pots, you're going to get a bigger plant and you'll get that same harvest that you were thinking of, just with less plants. And it's gotten me so convinced that I'm starting to think maybe I should move up to 30 gallons and do half the amount of plants. But I got to really convince Goblin about that. That would be a hard one.
This clip is brought to you by AC Infinity. Use discount code MrGrow at 15 to save on any of their products.